a world with no name in any Republic archive, the kind of place the galaxy forgot, or perhaps never knew. Pale rock faces etched by wind into something almost architectural, no color anywhere except gray, and the deep, bruised violet of a sky that has never been properly mapped. Taelara moves through ruins that predate everything. Not Sith, not Jedi, something older, the bones of a civilization so distant in time that the galaxy has grown entirely new skin over its memory. She moves slowly, not from age, from the particular carefulness of someone who understands that the ground beneath her feet is trying to say something. She finds the markings, a wall of them, floor to ceiling, carved with a precision that wasn't mechanical. Each stroke carries the minute variations of a hand, a mind, an intention. She raises her lightsaber, igniting it in a flash of blue light, studies them. She doesn't understand them yet. She sits down in front of them, cross-legged on the dust of a dead world, and waits for the Force to help her understand. Time passes, a lot of it. Her expression changes, not dramatically, not all at once. It changes the way ice cracks, one fine line appearing, then branching, then the whole surface shifting into something irreparably different from what it was before. She extinguishes the torch. In the darkness, we cannot see her. We can only hear her breathing. After a long moment, she stands. She begins the long walk back. Vaestrom's private study, the kind of room a person inhabits for so long that it stops looking like a room and starts looking like the inside of a mind. Books stacked without system, a dead plant someone keeps forgetting to remove, light coming through the window at an angle that suggests late afternoon or early morning. Depending on what kind of night you've had, he is reading when she walks in. He doesn't look up immediately, not because he hasn't heard her, but because 30 years of friendship has produced certain rituals, and the first of them is that he finishes his sentence before he does anything else. Taelara sits. She says nothing. She is very good at saying nothing in a way that sounds like everything. Vaestrom sets down the book, pours tea into 2 cups without asking. She accepts hers without thanking him. The silence between them is the comfortable kind, the kind that takes decades to build and is easily the most valuable thing either of them owns. Vaestrom, how long were you out there? Taelara, long enough to be certain. He looks at her over his cup, really looks at her. Something in what he sees makes him set the tea down. He says, "Tell me." She does. She tells him about the ruins, the markings, the language she spent weeks wrestling with, until the Force finally offered her the translation, like a key being pressed into her palm. She tells him what the markings said. She tells him about the civilization that came before. Not myth, not legend, but geological fact encoded in stone that predates the Republic by orders of magnitude she doesn't want to calculate aloud. The Verslian Empire did not discover this galaxy by accident. They have been here before. They left, or were made to leave. And what drove them out is connected to the Force in ways that Jedi theology has never fully reckoned with, ways that exist in the negative space between what the Order teaches and what the Order doesn't discuss. Vaestrom listens to all of it. He does not interrupt once. It is the discipline of a man who has learned, over a very long life, that the most dangerous thing you can do to information is react to it before it's finished arriving. When she stops, The silence is different from the one at the beginning. Heavier, more load-bearing. He begins the talk by saying, quietly, "How long have you been carrying this alone?" "Taylara, long enough. I needed to be certain before I brought it to you." "Vaestrom, and now?" "Taylara, now I'm certain." He nods, sets down his tea. The weight of it settles over both of them, like a change in weather. The kind you can feel in your joints before you can see it in the sky. We switch to the Grand Council chambers. It's different. More grand than in the prequels. The full council. 13 seats. Not all of them filled. Some masters are away. Some are stationed on distant worlds. The ones who are present represent a full spectrum of responses to information nobody wanted, buddy.
Master Iridra Sol sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression composed into something that resembled calm. It was not calm. The effort required to maintain such control revealed itself in subtle betrayals. The stiffness of her jaw held just a fraction too still, the unnatural rhythm of her blinking. At 33, she had spent the last 6 months watching a decade-long relationship with Master Jarek Thane erode into something shapeless, something she could neither define nor repair. Like many who mastered control as both shield and prison, she endured it in silence. 3 seats away, Master Jarek Thane maintained a distance that felt deliberate, though whether he experienced it as a wound remained impossible to tell. His face was arranged with practiced precision, betraying nothing. He was a man of lean sharpness, someone who seemed to have been born carrying an air of quiet age, and who would likely wear that same agelessness until time claimed it all at once. His daughter, Alyra Ven, was absent from the chamber. Her rank as knight barred her from council proceedings unless specifically summoned, yet her presence lingered regardless, unspoken but undeniable. She existed in the charged silence between Thane and Sol, the unacknowledged cause of the fracture that neither of them would name, though everyone in the room understood it. Across the chamber, Master Caden observed with a focused intensity that bordered on confrontation. He approached every idea as though it were something capable of deception, something that required scrutiny before it could be trusted. Taylara stood before them, presenting her findings. The chamber absorbed her words in a collective stillness, the kind that arises when information is too vast to be immediately processed. It was not agreement nor disbelief, but something closer to vertigo, an intellectual imbalance shared by all present. Caden broke the silence. He questioned her translation first, his tone precise, probing. Taylara answered with unflinching certainty, her composure unmarred by the scrutiny directed at her. When Caden pressed further, questioning the reliability of weeks spent in solitary decoding without secondary verification, she met the challenge without hesitation. She acknowledged the margin for error with clinical precision, yet in doing so subtly redirected the weight of inquiry back toward him. The margin, she implied, was narrower than he would find comfortable, and she was fully aware of the effect that admission would have. A brief flicker disturbed Caden's otherwise controlled expression. It was irritation, unmistakably so, at being assessed with such clarity. Yet beneath it lay something less immediate and more difficult to dismiss, a reluctant respect. Precision of this caliber was not something he encountered as often as he believed he ought to. He adjusted his approach, turning his attention to the age of the ruins and the methodology behind its determination. Taylara's response remained steady, unyielding. She outlined the process, mineral analysis conducted across 3 independent methods, without embellishment. When Caden pressed further, seeking the authority behind the findings, her answer was direct. The work had been her own. 3 years in the outer systems had not been spent deferring to others. This time, Caden did not respond immediately. Silence settled over him, not as a tactic, but as a necessity. For the first time since the session had begun, he was no longer posturing intellect, but engaging in it. The distinction was subtle, yet visible. A shift in expression that suggested not only consideration but the early formation of belief. When he spoke again, the tone of his inquiry had changed. It carried weight now, shaped by the recognition that the answer might matter more than he had initially allowed. He asked whether she truly believed that whatever had driven the ancients from those ruins was not merely a phenomenon of the galaxy, but something intrinsically tied to the Force itself. Taelara did not hesitate. Her conviction remained absolute. The ancients had believed it to be so, and in her estimation, they had not been mistaken. The silence that followed was deeper, more resonant than before, settling into the chamber with a quiet gravity. Weistrom, who had remained largely motionless throughout the exchange, observed Caden with a restrained satisfaction. There was a sense in him of expectation fulfilled, as though he were witnessing the precise unfolding of something long anticipated. Eridra Sol spoke next, her voice carefully measured, each word chosen with deliberate restraint. If Grand Regent Tome's arrival signified a return, if the Verslians possessed knowledge beyond the Council's current understanding, then every framework upon which their assumptions rested would need to be re-evaluated. Jarek Thane followed. His tone mirrored Sol's composure, though something beneath it shifted, something personal that surfaced only briefly before being contained. He reframed the discussion entirely. They had been approaching the situation as a matter of military calculus, territory, strength, strategic advantage. But that framework, he suggested, was insufficient. The reality before them was of a different nature altogether. Throughout the exchange, he did not look at Sol, nor did she look at him. The Council reached its decision with a quiet efficiency that bordered on inevitability. Formal contact with the Verslians would be initiated. Taelara would be dispatched to investigate the 2 remaining sites she had identified in the outer systems. She agreed to the assignment, but not without condition. She requested that her journey begin with Ilum. No one in the chamber questioned the request. Weistrom inclined his head in silent assent. The transition from the formal gravity of the council chamber to the living currents of Coruscant unfolded without ceremony. In the temple's lower corridors, far removed from the vaulted grandeur of public ritual, life moved with quiet efficiency. The lighting was dim, the architecture practical, the atmosphere shaped not by symbolism but by function. Alyra Ven moved through these corridors with familiarity. At 28, she bore a striking resemblance to her father, Master Jarek Thane, in ways that felt both precise and faintly unkind. The line of her jaw, the controlled economy of her posture, these were unmistakably his. Yet where Thane's precision conveyed restraint, Ven suggested something more elusive. It was not control so much as attunement, as though she were constantly listening to a frequency others could not perceive. She was not meant to know the contents of the council session. She knew them anyway. In a place where individuals were trained to sense the emotional undercurrents of those around them, information did not travel through official channels so much as through atmosphere. The temple carried its own weather, and Alyra had learned how to read it. She found Riven Kor in the refectory. He was seated alone, eating food that existed purely as sustenance, something engineered for efficiency rather than enjoyment. Broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, he possessed the contained restlessness of a man perpetually deciding whether or not to speak his mind, and more often than not choosing restraint despite appearances. Their friendship required no formal opening. Alyra asked if he had heard. He had, though only that the meeting had occurred, not its substance. She told him. The Verslians, she explained, had been here before, long before the Republic, embedded somewhere in the galaxy's forgotten history. Kor's reaction was subtle but definitive. He stopped eating. That, more than any expression, signaled that something had landed. He asked the only question that mattered, how it affected their assignment. Alyra did not yet have an answer, but she spoke of her father, of the way he had looked upon leaving the chamber. She did not finish the thought. She did not need to. Kor understood. He asked carefully whether Thane had seemed troubled or merely thoughtful. Both, she said, which meant, by extension, that Master Sol likely had as well. The silence that followed was deliberate and practiced, the silence of 2 people who cared deeply for someone and had learned over time how to negate that care without confronting it directly. Kor spoke her name. Alyra acknowledged him. He reminded her of a truth she already knew. She could not fix what lay between her father and Sol. She agreed, but agreement did nothing to diminish the impulse. Elsewhere in the temple, deep within the records archive, Master Caden worked alone. He had been there for 3 hours, immersed in research of a kind he rarely had the opportunity to pursue. The problem before him was complex, layered, something that demanded rigor rather than performance. In this, he found something close to satisfaction. It was not quite happiness, but it approached it. A Mirialan Jedi Knight approached him, young, meticulous, carrying with her the unmistakable discipline of someone who had been underestimated often enough to eliminate all margin for doubt. She presented her findings with clarity and precision, the product of 4 uninterrupted days of work. Kaidan listened. Her analysis was sharper, he noted, somewhat unwillingly, than he had anticipated. When she finished, she departed without embellishment. Kaidan remained, studying the datapad. His first instinct arose immediately, unexamined and automatic. Verify her conclusions against a secondary human source before presenting them to the council. He had already begun the process before he stopped. The interruption was small, almost imperceptible, but it was real. He leaned back, considering. A memory surfaced, Talara's voice, earlier that day, asking him a question he had dismissed at the time. When was the last time you took someone's word for something the first time? He had not answered then. He answered now. The answer came quickly, within seconds, and brought with it a discomfort he could not easily dismiss. Without further deliberation, he closed the secondary source. No one observed the action. No consequence would have followed had he proceeded otherwise. Yet the choice carried weight nonetheless. It may have been the smallest, difficult decision he had made in years, but it was no less significant for its scale. He rose, and when he brought the findings to the council, he presented them exactly as the knight had given them. The journey to Ilum unfolded beneath a vast and indifferent night. Within the quiet confines of the ship, Zane piloted while Mira sat near the viewport, her gaze fixed on the starfield beyond. It was a posture that suggested stillness, though in truth it concealed motion, thoughts turning, questions unresolved. The silence between them was not empty. It was dense with unspoken things. Zane broke it first. He spoke of Tira, not as someone fleeing, but as someone moving towards something. The distinction, he suggested, mattered. Mira did not immediately respond. When she did, her tone carried skepticism. His framing, she implied, was too neat. He rejected that interpretation. He was not seeking neatness, only truth. She considered this, then spoke of her own certainty, of her belief, before Tira's departure, that she had begun to earn the girl's trust. Zane did not contradict her. If anything, he affirmed it. Trust, he suggested, had likely been present, but insufficient. Tyra had chosen something else, something they could not provide. Mira turned to him then, the weight of her gaze sharp with unresolved responsibility. They should have tried harder, she said. Zane did not hesitate, he agreed. It was the correct answer, and perhaps the most difficult. Mira held his gaze for a moment longer, searching for resistance that did not come. Finding none, she turned back to the stars. Neither of them slept. Elsewhere, aboard a different vessel under a different sky, Callan Rick sat in the pilot's chair of the Wayward Meridian. He appeared, at first glance, to embody a life carefully constructed around detachment. His boots rested on the console, a glass balanced loosely in hand, his posture communicating an almost studied indifference. At 62, he wore his age not as decline, but as consolidation. A man who had endured enough to distinguish between what mattered and what did not, and had adjusted accordingly. The lightsaber at his belt, unused for 11 years, remained nonetheless. An old argument, unresolved. The comm crackled. A job was offered. Outer systems, retrieval, standard terms. Rix noted the increased presence of Verslian scouts. The rate improved. He paused, considering not the offer but the inevitability of his response. He accepted, with conditions. When the channel closed, he finished his drink and set it aside. The shift in posture was immediate. Efficiency replaced languor. Calculations began. He did not look again at the lightsaber, but he did not remove it. Act 4. Ilum was a world of silence, of ice and resonance. Tira had been there for 4 days. By the second, the cold had ceased to trouble her. Not through adaptation alone, but through something more difficult to articulate. The planet did not feel hostile. It felt aware. She had not attempted to explain this to Artem. She suspected explanation would diminish it. Artem offered no formal instruction. Instead, he moved through his routines and allowed her to observe. Gradually, she understood. This was the instruction. She watched how he listened before acting, how he touched the cave walls, not for show, but with an unguarded reverence, how he treated Ilum not as a place, but as something alive, something with its own perspective. She asked him eventually about her father. Artem answered with honesty rather than comfort. Calestis, he said, had been principled, sometimes difficult because of it, the kind of Jedi whose difficulty was a virtue. When she asked if he believed her father was alive, Artem answered simply, yes. Not knowledge, he clarified. Belief. The distinction mattered. Knowledge was constructed from evidence. Belief, he suggested, moved through the Force. One could fail. The other, in matters of consequence, rarely did. That night, Tira found herself drawn to the crystal caves, not by decision, but by something quieter and more insistent. Inside, the world transformed. The crystals refracted light into something beyond vision, an experience closer to music than sight. The air carried a vibration, a hum that existed somewhere between sound and sensation. She moved deeper. At the heart of the caves, she found it. A single kyber crystal, pale at its center, edged with violet, waiting. She took it in her hand. The world fell silent, and then the Force moved, not as vision, but as immersion. Her father, alive, present, waiting, not afraid. That absence of fear undid her more completely than anything else. A connection stretched between them, thin, unbroken. When she returned to herself, she was kneeling, the crystal pressed to her chest. Artem waited at the cave entrance. He had not followed, he had trusted. She told him. He answered not with belief this time, but with certainty. Act 5. On the bridge of the Verslian flagship, Grand Regent Tome received the report. The reaction was subtle, contained, but unmistakable. Coordinates were given. Tome studied the star map, something older than strategy passing briefly across their expression. They had found the markings. This was confirmed. Tome's response was quiet, approval. A shift, small but deeply personal. The one who found them, Tome noted, would return, and when she did, she would seek conversation. The fleet held position. The galaxy, for a moment, seemed to pause with it. Cold Open, Episode 5. In a private chamber aboard the flagship, a space defined not by luxury but by austerity, Tome stood alone. The room contained almost nothing, except the artifact. Ancient beyond comprehension, unfamiliar in design, yet unmistakably connected to the ruins Talara had studied. Tome approached it without the trappings of authority, not as a ruler, as something else. They touched it lightly, closed their eyes, and in that moment the truth became clear. This was not conquest. It was inheritance, an obligation carried across generations, a purpose believed in absolutely, which made Tome dangerous, and to those capable of recognizing it, something more. Talara's arrival on Ilum was understated. Her ship descended without spectacle, settling into the ice plain with deliberate anonymity. She stepped out into the wind, paused, listened. The Force here was layered, ancient, unhurried. She breathed it in, then moved without hesitation toward the caves. Artem met her. Their reunion required no display. Respect existed between them, independent of words. He guided her toward something she needed to see. Tira emerged from the caves, the crystal in her hands, the change in her unmistakable. Talara crossed the distance and knelt before her, not as authority, but as equal. She spoke of the Force's consistency, of Tira's father. Recognition dawned. A connection formed, and with it, the understanding that their paths were now intertwined. Act 2. On Coruscant, Eridra Sol sat alone with her thoughts, the morning light offering no clarity. Jarek Thane arrived, not as council member, as father. He spoke of Elira, of her assignment, of his concern, of the tension between trust and protection. Sol listened, and then gently insisted on what he already knew. He could not shield his daughter from the work she was meant to do. He admitted as much. But acknowledgement did not ease the difficulty. At her request, he sat. Between them, the past lingered, unresolved but not unreachable. The doors to Senator Raven Sale's private chambers sealed behind him with a sound like a held breath finally released, a soft, pneumatic hiss that swallowed the noise of the corridor whole. Silence followed. Absolute, presidential. He had chosen this room for that very quality years ago, when he first took his seat in the Alaran Senate. Silence, he had learned, was the only honest currency in politics. For a moment, he stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, his broad shoulders lowered, the rigid posture he wore in public loosening, as though it had been armor he could finally set aside. Here alone, the performance could pause. Dim amber light bled in through the orbital window. Beyond the glass, Allura's twin moons hung like pale witnesses, their glow cold and indifferent against the black. The faint light caught the silver at his temples. He was handsome in the way powerful men often are, not because nature had been especially kind, but because authority had carved something sharp and deliberate into his face over decades. His jaw was strong. His dark eyes were the sort praised as warm in speeches and described as calculating in private. Tonight, they were neither. Tonight, they were afraid. He crossed the room without turning on the lights. He didn't deserve the lights. Not yet. Not until it was done. At the center of the chamber, an obsidian desk sat untouched, its surface broken only by a single device, a hollow projector, no larger than his palm, a disc of brushed tungsten. Ordinary. Harmless at a glance, the kind of tool used for legislation reviews or quiet conferences with aides. He had never used it for either. Cale placed 2 fingers on its surface, then his thumb. After a brief hesitation, he flattened his palm against it. Beneath his skin, the scan danced once, a heartbeat of pale blue light, and accepted him. The room changed. A column of silver-white light erupted upward, silent and cold, stretching from the disc to the ceiling. It cast no warmth. Shadows bent unnaturally, falling in directions that defied the room's geometry. The projection stabilized. The figure within it did not. It was shaped like a man, broadly. But something was wrong. The proportions slipped if you looked too long. Shoulders a fraction too wide, a neck subtly too long, its posture bearing a weight the human body did not distribute that way. Layers of dark fabric draped its form, one over another. Where its face should have been, there was only a mask. Smooth, seamless. Light seemed to vanish into it rather than reflect off it. No eyes, no mouth, nothing that should have allowed speech. And yet, Senator, the voice arrived wrong. Each syllable came staggered, clipped at the edges, like sound dragged across broken glass. It carried immense depth, something vast and suffocating, but its texture was fractured as if language itself had been dismantled and imperfectly rebuilt. Beneath it all ran a mechanical wheeze, steady and rhythmic, a bellows drawing breath. You have kept me waiting. Cale straightened at once. Decades of political survival snapped into place, every instinct forcing composure over the cold flood in his veins. There were eyes on me, he said. There are always eyes on me now. Then you should have moved faster. I moved as fast as was. Faster. The word struck like a door slamming shut. Cale stopped. The figure did not move. It never moved. Not in any natural way. When it shifted, it simply was elsewhere. The transition swallowed by something that refused to let light record it honestly. Cale leaned forward, his knuckles pressing into the edge of the desk. Something desperate clawed up beneath his control. The planet is under siege, he said, his voice low and tight. I don't know who they are, I don't know where they came from, but they are here, in the Senate District. 2 of my men were found in the lower corridor of the Alloran archives 3 nights ago. He swallowed. Not killed, erased, no blood, no struggle, nothing. Just the shape of where they'd been. Silence answered him. The projector hummed faintly, an electric whisper in the dark. The councils are asking questions I cannot answer, Cale continued. The Security Bureau is sniffing at doors I cannot afford to have opened. Whoever is moving against us, they are not random, they are precise, surgical. They know our structure. He hesitated. The next words cost him. They may know about the plan. The figure breathed. In, out. It said nothing for a long time. And Cale understood, deep in the same instinct that tells prey when a predator is near, that this silence was not thought, not uncertainty. It was patience. You believe this threatens what we have built. Yes, you believe it threatens you. A beat passed. Yes, he admitted. Good. Something shifted in the broken cadence of the voice. Not warmth, never that, but something closer to satisfaction, rendered in a frequency the human heart was not meant to endure. Fear is the only honest intelligence report, Senator. Fear means you are finally seeing clearly. Cale's jaw tightened. I'm telling you we have a problem that... You have a problem. The interruption was soft, precise, cutting. I have a variable. These are not the same thing. Do not confuse your fear for my crisis. With respect, you will locate the origin of this interference, the figure said, each fractured syllable carrying absolute certainty. You will contain it. You will do so without involving anyone whose loyalty has not been written in something more binding than words. The wheezing breath continued. In the next cycle, Senator, this will be resolved, or what those men left behind in the archive. That absence, that clean and terrible nothing, will seem like a mercy compared to what unfinished work becomes. The column of light vanished. Darkness reclaimed the room. The amber glow returned. The moon's distant and indifferent. Raven Kale stood alone for a long time. The silence pressed in on him, heavier now than before, as if it carried memory. Outside, the twin moons watched, cold, patient, unmoved. Inside, a powerful man struggled quietly, desperately, to remember how to breathe.